Today, we want to talk about a woman who walked into one of the most horrifying houses in Britain and somehow lived to tell the tale. This is the story of Kathleen Richards, the girl who escaped the house of Fred and Rose West. Girl who escaped Fred and Rose West's house of horrors. It was 1979. In the quiet city of Gloucester, England, a place where neighbours left their doors unlocked and everyone knew each other by name. But behind one of those doors, at 25 Cromwell Street, lived two of the most sadistic murderers Britain had ever seen, Fred and Rose West, and one teenage girl. Kathleen Richards unknowingly stepped straight into their nightmare, and somehow lived to tell the tale. Kathleen's story didn't begin with the Wests. It began years earlier, in Dublin, where she was born into a poor and deeply troubled family. She was the fourth of 10 children. Her father sold scrap metal and firewood from a horse and cart, spending what little money he had on himself. The children were underfed, unloved, and regularly beaten. Kathleen grew up sharing a bed with her siblings. Her classmates mocked her, calling her smelly, because her clothes were soaked in urine. She scrubbed the family home daily, desperate for approval that never came. The only gift she ever received from her parents was a broken, one-legged doll her father found at a dump. She named it Polly and adored it, but childhood for Kathleen wasn't just neglect, it was abuse. One summer, while searching for food, she and her sister sneaked into a factory garden to steal apples. A middle-aged caretaker caught them. He lured Kathleen into his hut with the promise of sweets, and made her perform acts no child should even know about. He paid her a penny. And she went back, again and again. A year later, her grandfather began doing the same thing. He told her to do to him what the caretaker had. Sometimes, when he had no penny, he paid her with a boiled potato. Kathleen began to believe she was worth only a penny, or a potato, when she finally told her mother what her grandfather had done. Her mother didn't comfort her. She screamed, "Get out, you!" That was the day Kathleen learned silence was safer than truth. Years later, her family moved to England, settling first in Derby, then in Gloucester. But life didn't get better. When Kathleen was 17, her mother told her and her sister, Deirdre, that there was no room for them anymore. They had to leave. The girls were desperate. And that's when they heard about a couple who rented out cheap rooms to young women. "They're nice people," someone said, always helping others. Their names were Fred and Rose West. When Kathleen and Deirdre arrived at 25 Cromwell Street, Fred greeted them with a grin. He introduced them to his wife, Rose, and another girl named Shirley Robinson, whom he called his lover. Kathleen thought he was joking. Shirley was her age, just 17. But it wasn't a joke. Fred and Rose West lived by no rules but their own.at first. The sisters thought the place was chaotic but harmless. Kids ran around everywhere, and Fred always seemed busy, hammering, drilling, digging the patio, laughing. But soon, the warning signs started showing. In their room, there were strange holes in the wall. The sisters stuffed them with paper, but every morning, the paper would be pushed out from the other side. Kathleen began to realize that Fred wasn't just strange. He was watching her. He would corner her in the hallway, press himself against her, pinch her, whispering, "Lovely ass. Girly." Sometimes he'd grab her throat or shove her into the wall until she could barely breathe. He smelled of death, a rancid stench that clung to him. Kathleen told her sister she was terrified. But they had nowhere to go. She tried to report him once. She walked to the police station, sat outside crying, and left without going in. She didn't think anyone would believe her. Fred was popular, married, and friendly. She was just a poor girl with no one to defend her. The West's world was dark and twisted. Rose was unpredictable. 1 minute sweet, the next, screaming. She would sit watching hardcore pornography, smiling silently at the girls, as if daring them to say something. Fred called Shirley his lover openly. Kathleen found it disturbing, the idea that a teenage girl lived in the same house as a married couple, pregnant with the husband's child, while the wife not only allowed it but encouraged it. One day, Kathleen came home and Shirley was gone. Fred said she'd gone back to Germany to be with family. But she hadn't packed, hadn't said goodbye, and had no money for a flight. Shirley Robinson was never seen alive again. After she vanished, Fred's attacks grew worse. He had a spare key to Kathleen's room. When her sister went away, she would drag furniture against the door to stop him. But one night, it didn't help. Kathleen woke up to find Fred West in her bed, his hands all over her. She begged him to let her go. He said he would, but only if she agreed to have some fun later with him and Rose. She promised she would. When he left the room, Kathleen grabbed her chance. She ran barefoot down the stairs, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it would wake the house. She pushed open the door and ran. She hid at the bus station until her sister returned. When Deirdre arrived, Kathleen told her everything. They went back once to collect their things and never returned to 25 Cromwell Street again. But the nightmares didn't end. Kathleen moved on with her life, but the trauma followed her. She fell into depression, haunted by Fred's face. At 19, she tried to end her life with an overdose. She survived, but the ghost stayed years past. Kathleen built a new life, married, had children, divorced. She tried to forget. Then one February evening in 1994, she was cooking dinner when the radio broke a news alert. Police in Gloucester have begun excavating the property of Frederick and Rosemary West at 25 Cromwell Street, in connection with multiple murders. Kathleen dropped what she was holding. The house she had escaped was being dug up because people had been buried there. Point one of the first bodies found was Shirley Robinson, her old friend, the girl who'd eaten red ice lollies with her on the steps. Shirley had been pregnant when she was killed. Fred West was arrested and charged with 12 murders. Before he could face trial, he took his own life in prison in 1995. Rose West was tried and convicted of 10 murders, sentenced to life without parole. She remains in prison to this day. For Kathleen, it was like reliving the horror all over again. All I could see was Fred West's face, she said. It was everywhere, in my dreams, in my head, in the dark. Even though she had escaped, she said she'd been serving her own life sentence ever since, now in her 60s. Kathleen finally decided to tell the full truth, in her memoir, Under Their Roof. For decades, she couldn't bring herself to admit everything Fred had done to her. Not to her friends, not to her family, not even to police. She says it took her nearly 50 years to find the words. Her story isn't just one of horror, it's one of survival. Of how abuse creates silence, and silence keeps monsters hidden. Kathleen Richards should have been another name in a list of forgotten victims. But she wasn't. She escaped. And because she survived, we know what really happened behind the walls of 25 Cromwell Street. Today, when she walks through the streets of Gloucester, she still feels the weight of what happened. But she says she tells her story so that others might recognize the warning signs and never fall into the hands of people like Fred and Rose West. Because sometimes, evil doesn't hide in the shadows. It hides behind a smile. Behind a family home. Behind a white front door at number 25 Cromwell Street. If this story moved you, if it chilled you, shocked you, or made you think, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Echoes of the Vanished for more true stories like this one. Every week, we dive deep into real cases, the mysteries, the monsters, and the survivors who lived to tell their truth, because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that really happened.